We tend to convince ourselves that when we are so passionate and so knowledgeable, that is enough to provide a winning presentation. But the key, what I have learned, is that when we take knowledge and passion, which are absolutely crucial to a winning presentation, and we curate them with a framework, with strategies, and with tactics, that is the formula for a winning presentation. So we've got to have the knowledge and passion, but we also need to have framework, strategies, and tactics. And so today we're going to dig deep and we're going to go straight to the tactics. And I'm going to share my top 10 tips for a winning presentation. All right, let's talk about number one. Let's start with the beginning. Today, many of you know this, but it's important to never forget, the minds are more distracted, more expecting to be stimulated than ever before. So I implore you, please, number one tip, make your opening unpredictable. Make your opening unpredictable. People are expecting you to come out and do what? They're expecting you to come out onto the stage or to the screen or to the microphone, and you're there to convince them of something, to sell them something, to try to get them to change their beliefs or to act. If we start with that, we become predictable. Another really common predictable opening is to say, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to see you. My name is Tara Heaton, and I represent On Point Communication. All those things tell your audience to prepare to be bored. And do you know what? Audiences today, the brains of today, fear boredom and complexity more than anything else. So remember that. We fear boredom and complexity. We have that old caveman's fight or flight mechanism, the amygdala in the back of the brain, and it tells us what to fear. Today, we rarely fear hunger or our lives anymore, but our brain, because of all the stimulation, fears boredom and complexity. So make your opening unpredictable. You could do that by starting with a question that engages the audience. You could also start it off with a story, which we're going to get into later. But no matter what you do, make sure that the opening is unpredictable. And then that will immediately tell the amygdala, this might be something new and novel. The brain likes novel. All right, let's go on to talk to the brain tip number 2. We're going to talk about the closing. I am part of an organization called Authority Speakers Agency, and the president, Amy Dix, she says it this way: you have to land the plane. You could give a clear, compelling, memorable presentation, but if you don't wrap it up and put a bow on it and give the listeners something to take away, I promise you they will soon forget your message. There are a lot of ways to do this, to make that powerful close, and we're going to get into that a little bit more when we go into some of the tactics, but I want to give you a couple of ideas now. Our brain is seeking reward. Our brains are constantly seeking reward. So you may recall that when I shared this presentation, I said, I'm also going to share, in addition to the top 10 tips, I'm going to share the number one mistake that my clients make, and I'm going to do that at the end of this presentation. So you see, I'm offering a reward. It is really wise to offer an reward toward the beginning, and at the close with power and give the reward. I did this in my recent TED Talk. I said to the audience early on, I said, I'm going to share with you 2 things that I promised my daughter. The first promise was that I would never stop searching until I could give her a life free of seizures. And then I said, and that second promise, that's where you come in, and we'll get to that a little bit later. And that pulled the audience onto the edge of their seats, wanting to get to the end. That helps focus. So make sure, as Amy Dix would say, that your closing lands the plane. Wrap up your message and deliver it. All right, let's go on to talk to the brain tip number 3. Okay, let's talk about, this could be tough for some folks. Talk to the brain tip number 3 for a winning presentation is to engage and interact with the audience. Now, I get a lot of pushback from clients with this. When you do something like a TED Talk, you may not have that opportunity, or do you? Even asking rhetorical questions to an audience brings them in. It causes them to engage. So a large setting engagement and a small setting engagement are two different things. Let's break that down for just a moment. I want to start with a small setting. I want to encourage you, if you have a small setting, to take questions but remain in control of the room. Here's why people get nervous about answering questions. They're afraid that they might be asked a question that they don't know the answer to. Remember this, you already have the knowledge and the passion. Own it. Whatever you believe it with all your heart and bring that. That sells, that's magical, that's memorable. So when people come to you with questions, what that does is it fires up oxytocin because they see that you're authentic, that you're just not a scripted speech and that you can answer deep questions. Don't fear questions. If someone does ask you a question that you don't know the answer to, tell them exactly that. I don't know, but I will find out. Again, that builds trust. So in small settings, I definitely want to encourage questions. In larger settings, you can call people onto the stage. You can have breakout by two. However you choose to do it, just make sure that you keep the audience engaged and active. Okay, let's go on to number 4. Hopefully, I'm already modeling number 4, but I cannot minimize that we have to bring emotion and enthusiasm to our talk. Now, that seems kind of obvious, but I want to caution us to remember something. We work sometimes so hard on the words. If we're really practicing, we're thinking about what we want to say. We work so hard on the words that we leave our emotion and our enthusiasm. What I used to tell salespeople, we leave ourselves in the car. Bring yourselves and your passion and knowledge to your presentation. One of my very first sales coaches said something to me after one of my worst and first presentations ever, and I will never forget it, and has served me for 20 plus years. He said to me this, he said, Tara, if you believe something, say it like you mean it, or don't say it at all. And I am telling you, I have never forgotten those words. Believe in your expertise and what you believe to be true. Remember this too. If we try to appeal to everyone, to make sure that we're careful and that we don't upset the apple cart and nothing stirs up anything, we will be spectacular and memorable to no one. So whatever it is that you believe it with all your heart. And what I do to help make sure that I bring passion and emotion to presentations is that after I'm finished preparing, I have a little mantra. I have a mantra, and I usually play a song to get me in that place. But the mantra is this. When we're speaking to others, it is never about us. So I remind myself, Tara, this is not about you. This is about serving the people that have invested their time to spend with you. That will help you to bring your passion and emotion. Why is this important? So I've just given you a tactic. Why is this important? This is important because people act on emotion and they justify it with logic. So remember that. People act on emotion, but then they need to justify it with logic. And that's where the words come in. All right, let's move on to number 5. This one is not so easy to say, but this is where coaches can be absolutely invaluable. Number 5 is be intentional with tone, cadence, body movement, and attire. This really leads into what I just shared, is that people are going to remember about 7 to 10% of your words, best case. The rest of it is how you bring it. So I'm going to give some fun little tips about cadence because I love to practice cadence. When you're trying to list something really fast to cause the audience to maybe have a feeling of stress or overwhelm, that's a time when we can speed up. Like if you have a long list of something. I did this in my TEDx talk when I talked about something that I call pleasure stacking. And I was giving the example that during the pandemic, we learned to trade human connection for little hits of pleasure, which I call pleasure stacking. So we made our best friends Peloton, Amazon, YouTube, Xbox, Netflix, DoorDash, Instacart, Instagram, and don't forget junk food, caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, CBD, THC, and worse. So you see how I sped up the cadence. I didn't need people to remember those words. I needed them to feel them, and that's when we speed up cadence. When do we slow down our cadence? I always encourage you during your talk to craft something called a sizzle statement. One of the most important times to slow down in a talk is right before you deliver your sizzle statement. Does anybody remember the sizzle statement of one of the most popular TED Talks of all time? It was the Golden Circle TED Talk from Simon Sinek. Now, if you haven't seen it in a long time, you may not remember it, but I'm going to give it to you. Simon Sinek made this statement 6 times in one talk, and it is simply this: people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. He said it 6 times in 18 minutes. About halfway through my TED Talk, I delivered my sizzle statement. And I said it 3 times. We have the greatest capacity for joy, not when we have people around, but when we let people in. This sizzle statement is so important because people can be as excited as they possibly can be about your message. But if we don't give them something to repeat, I promise you they will forget the message. They won't take action. So speeding up and slowing down and really delivering that sizzle statement can make all the difference in your presentation. Okay, a couple other tips on tone, cadence, and body movement. Who can tell me where you should be looking when you're giving a virtual presentation? At the camera. Absolutely. It is so awkward because we tend to look at ourselves, and better than that, we might look at other people, but you really should be looking like I'm looking right now, right at the camera. Now, I'll look at the camera for a while and then I get really tired. It's very hard to do, but that's the practice, looking at the camera. How about in a live setting? Remember this. This is power, y'all. Lock eyes with as many people as you possibly can. Maybe if it's only for a second or two, lock eyes with the people in the room, one at a time. It not only makes them feel connected, it fires up serotonin and oxytocin, it causes them to lean in. It also helps you to feel grounded and safe because you feel that you're talking to people who care. Lock eyes. Okay. All right, let's move on to the Talk to the Brain tip number 6. This is very, very important, and I touched on it in the very beginning. We tend to believe that if we have all this passion and all this knowledge, that we don't need to practice. The pros practice, y'all. Practice is crucial. I want you to think about something for a minute. I believe that we all have the most precious resource, and it's the same for all of us. And I believe it's our time. I have lost sales, not because people didn't like my price tag. It's because they weren't willing to invest the time of their team. When you take a microphone or stand before people, they are trusting you with their most treasured resource. That is their time. So I want to encourage you to honor their time by taking the time to practice and prepare. It will make all the difference in the world, not only in clarifying your message, especially if you've got that Talk to the Brain framework ready. I mean, you can plug a speech into that framework quickly, but the practicing helps you to nail those key phrases. It helps you to really deliver the sizzle statement and not to feel nervous. When we prepare, we feel more confident, and that makes us more trustworthy. So practice. Record yourself. There's a voice memo in the iPhone. I use it all the time. I play it back, and then record yourself on video. You can really see where you can really improve. All right. Talk to the brain tip number 7 for winning presentations. This one is more of a pet peeve, but it's so important. Remember this, your slides are a backdrop to the presentation. The star of the show is you and your passion and your knowledge and your preparation. Most people know this, but I keep seeing this over and over again. So here are some tips to help you not make your slideshow the focus. That's not what we want. The slideshow should really reinforce your message. So number 1 about slides is if you're using your own slide to read your own notes, girl, dude, you got to prepare. That's not what slides are for. The slides are not for you. They're for your audience. If you think it's really important to have those bullet lists coming onto the screen, a couple things. One thing that I like to do is use them as reinforcement to come back and basically review or summarize what I've already said. That's one way to do it. If you are just determined to show bullet points one at a time, if you're determined to show bullet points, please, please, please show them one at a time. It's called Animate in PowerPoint. It's called something else in Keynote. But I know this with all these years of studying the brain. 2% of us have the capacity to read and comprehend at the same time. So if you've got a bunch of words on a screen and you're talking while you're hoping that people will read it, you're diluting your message and the power of what's on the screen. It is really derailing your message. The most powerful slides are big pictures followed up by small phrases. Big pictures, small phrases. Those phrases that you want to nail. During my TED Talk, I showed a picture of a woman who's sitting alone. And then I animated in this 3 words, loneliness and stress. And I said, loneliness and stress are accelerating our consumption compulsion. I wanted the audience to remember what is causing us to pleasure stack, loneliness and stress. That's the power of a solid slide. It backs up your message. You are the focus. Okay, I'm just watching the time here. All right, we have 3 more. Number 8, overcome perceived objections. Now this, a lot more, first of all, before I even go into this, I want us to think about the purpose of a talk. And if I'm missing something, I'd love to hear from you. The purpose of the talk might be to get people to act, to get people to invest, to get people to change their beliefs, to get people to change their habits. The purpose of a talk has some type of action tied to it. And typically, we already know some of the objections in the minds of the audience. We are afraid to voice those because we think, well, if I say it out loud, if I say it seems expensive, then maybe somebody didn't think that until I said it. Whatever you think the objections are, say them. Don't hide from them, because that makes people feel that they're validated and that you understand. If you wait for the people in the audience to voice the objections, do you know what that does? It puts you on the defensive. But if you voice the objections, then magically that puts you on the side of the desk, so to speak, with your audience. It says to them, I understand. I understand I'm asking a lot to show your vulnerable side, for example. I understand how scary it might be. And that's where you might want to even infuse a story. And that is the number 9 tip for a winning presentation. And I saved it second to last because, as you all know, I am super passionate about stories. Stories have the power to change the world. I truly believe that. Now, I teach a story structure, which I definitely would encourage you learning or getting a coach and learning a really solid story structure. But I want to give a couple tips on story right now. We have in our heads oftentimes that we have our story, our one big signature story. We have hundreds of stories that decorate the journey of our life. The journey of our life is not a story. It is a journey. And along that journey, there are literally hundreds of stories. A story, y'all, is just a transformational moment in time. That's what a story is. That is the power of story. Stories make us remember. A story with stats where we show numbers and colors, that's what makes your message repeatable. That's what allows people to take that message forward. So your message should start with your signature story, decorate with a few anecdotes or short stories, and then at that closing, tie it all back in and put a bow on it like I talked about. All right, we have time for our last, number 10, most important talk to the brain tip, and that is to make one powerful point. I get so much pushback on this because people say, I have this message and I have this message and I have this point. How can I possibly make one point? You may have, for an effective, and this is research proven, y'all, you may have 3 to 5 supporting points that support your one big single idea. Passion and knowledge are not enough for a winning presentation. We need framework, strategies, and tactics. Passion and knowledge are not enough. We need to curate them with framework, strategy, and tactics. My final tactic is to do what I just modeled. Make one clear, compelling point. You've probably heard this saying by Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget the way you made them feel. I subscribe to this. And if we don't give that sizzle statement a very clear message, people will forget what you said and they won't do what you want them to do. Your message needs to bring one clear point. You can back it up with supporting ideas, back it up with stories. Make sure that you deliver that sizzle statement slowly and clearly. But a compelling talk brings one clear, powerful idea. So there you have it, the top 10 talk to the brain tips for a winning presentation. And as promised, this 10th strategy is going to share the number one mistake that my clients make, and I bet y'all can guess what it is. I call it pin the tail on the donkey. The pin the tail on the donkey strategy is this. It's the mindset that I'm just going to keep throwing out thoughts and ideas, as many as I possibly can, hoping that one of them will stick.
One of them sticks.
That is a losing strategy, y'all. One of them might stick, one of them might not, but it dilutes your entire message. So I go back to my final talk to the brain tip. Make sure that you really work hard on crafting that signature sizzle statement. That will bring your message home.